The bus station on Colfax had been abandoned for 3 years before Sarah found it. She pulled her hoodie tighter around her face and slipped through the gap in the chain-link fence. The hole was just big enough for her narrow shoulders. She had found it 2 weeks ago and told no one. That was the rule. You find a place to sleep and you keep your mouth shut. The Denver wind cut through her jeans like they were nothing. February in Colorado did not care if you had a roof. The cold just found you anyway. The main waiting area still had half the ceiling tiles left. The rest had fallen and shattered across the floor. Sarah stepped over the broken pieces without making a sound. She had learned to move quiet. Loud got you noticed. Noticed got you moved along. Moved along meant finding another spot in the dark when it was 10 degrees outside. She found her corner behind the old ticket counter. The counter still had the gray laminate peeling up at the edges. Someone had left a Greyhound schedule from 2019 stuck under a broken chair. She had memorized the cities on that schedule during her first night inside. Denver to Omaha, Omaha to Chicago, Chicago to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh to New York. She had never been east of Kansas. She laid her sleeping bag against the wall. The bag was olive green and smelled like mildew. She got it from a church basement 3 months ago. The woman who gave it to her had kind eyes and a cross around her neck. Sarah remembered her name was Deborah.
Deborah asked if she needed a place to stay that night. Sarah said no thank you. She did not say that shelter scared her more than the cold. She did not say that the last shelter she tried in Albuquerque had bed bugs and a man who followed her to the bathroom. She just said no thank you and took the sleeping bag and walked away. That was 8 months ago. 8 months since the motel room. 8 months since she looked at her bank account and saw $17.42. 8 months since she realized the temp agency was not going to call back. 8 months since she sat on the edge of a bed that was not hers and tried to figure out what came next. She was 31 years old. She had a high school diploma and 2 years of community college she never finished. She had worked since she was 16. Restaurants, retail, a warehouse job packing boxes for a company that made dog food, a call center where she sat in a cubicle and listened to old people yell at her about their cable bills. She was good at that job. She was patient. She could stay calm when people screamed. Her supervisor told her she had a gift for de-escalation. Then the call center closed and moved to Oklahoma, and that was that. She zipped the sleeping bag up to her chin and pulled her beanie down over her ears. The beanie was black and said Broncos on the front in orange letters. She found it in a laundromat on Federal Boulevard. Someone left it on top of a dryer.
She waited 20 minutes to see if they would come back. They did not. She washed it twice in a gas station sink before she put it on her head. That was the kind of thing nobody understood about being homeless. The math you had to do on everything. How long to wait before something abandoned became something you could take. How to balance your own survival against the chance that someone else was coming back for their hat. She closed her eyes, but she did not sleep. She never slept right away. Her mind ran through the same list every night. What she had, what she needed, what she could do tomorrow. She had a backpack with 3 t-shirts, 2 pairs of socks, a toothbrush, and a library card. She had a phone with a cracked screen and a charging block she could use at the library. She had $43 in cash inside her left shoe. She had a fake leather wallet with no cards in it except her Colorado ID and an expired bus pass. She had no family within 600 miles. Her mother lived in Phoenix with a man who did not like Sarah. Her father was dead. He died when she was 19, liver failure. He was 52. She did not cry at the funeral. Not because she was strong, because she had already cried so much about that man that there was nothing left. She thought about him sometimes at night in the bus station. He was a roofer. He worked hard and drank harder. He taught her how to throw a softball and how to change a tire and how to tell if a man was lying.
He did not teach her how to save money because he did not know how himself. He did not teach her how to pick a good man because he was not one. He loved her. She knew that. But love and skill are different things. You can love someone with everything you have and still leave them completely unprepared for the world. Sarah woke up to the sound of a train horn 3 blocks away. The light coming through the broken windows was gray and thin, early, maybe 6:30. She sat up slow and listened. No footsteps, no voices. She was alone. She stuffed the sleeping bag into her backpack. It barely fit. She had to sit on it to get the zipper closed. She walked to the fence and slipped back through the hole. The air smelled like diesel and frozen dirt. Colfax was quiet this early. A few cars, a bus going the other way, a man pushing a shopping cart full of aluminum cans. He did not look at her. Nobody looked at anybody this early. That was another rule. She walked 12 blocks to the library on Broadway. The library opened at 9, but she knew a spot behind the building where the heating vent blew warm air. She sat on the concrete with her back against the brick and waited. She pulled out her phone. 2% battery. She plugged it into the charging block and watched the little lightning bolt appear next to the battery icon. She had 3 voicemails, all from the same number. She had not listened to them. The number belonged to her younger sister. Her name was Michelle.
She was 27. She lived in a duplex in Aurora with her boyfriend and their 2 kids. Michelle had called every week for the past 8 months. Sarah had answered twice. The first time she lied and said she was staying with a friend. The second time she said she was fine and then hung up because she was about to cry and she did not want Michelle to hear it. She opened her email. Nothing from any of the jobs she applied to last week. She had applied to 13. Grocery stores, fast food, a cleaning company, a hotel desk job she knew she would not get because her teeth were bad and her clothes were wrinkled. She closed the email and opened the Notes app. She had a list in there. Things to do today. Call the shelters to ask about a bed. Go to the food bank at the church on Grant. Walk to the temp agency on Colfax and check in. Fill out more applications at the library computers. Do not spend money on coffee. Do not spend money on anything. The list had been the same for weeks with small changes. She added one new thing at the bottom. Call Michelle back. She did not know if she would do that last one. The library doors opened at 9 and she was the 3rd person inside. She went straight to the computers in the back corner, the ones with the good lighting and the outlets that worked. She signed in with her library card number. She had it memorized. 214-037-EAM22. She typed it slow.
Her fingers were cold even inside the building. She opened the job search website and filtered by entry level and within 5 miles. 37 results. She had seen most of them before. She applied to the ones she had not. A dishwasher at a diner, a stock clerk at a hardware store, a janitor at a daycare. She attached her resume. She typed a short cover letter in the box. My name is Sarah, and I have worked since I was 16. I am reliable and I show up on time. I would appreciate the chance to talk with you about this job. Thank you for your time. She sent each application and watched the little loading circle spin. Then she opened a second tab and typed in the search bar, how to interview when you are homeless. She had looked this up before. The answers were always the same. Use a friend's address, borrow clean clothes, do not mention your situation. She did not have a friend with an address she could use. She had not had a friend like that in years. The people she knew from high school were married or moved away or had their own problems. The people she worked with at the call center had stopped texting back after the 3rd time she said she could not afford to get a drink after work. She looked at the clock on the computer, 10:15. The food bank opened at 11. She had time. She walked to the bathroom and washed her face in the sink. The water was cold but clean. She looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a woman who looked older than 31.
Her skin was dry. Her eyes had dark circles under them. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had not been washed in 3 days. She saw her mother's cheekbones and her father's chin. She saw a person she used to know, the person who laughed at lunch with her coworkers, the person who bought a new dress for her birthday, the person who had an apartment with a security deposit and a lease and a futon from IKEA. That person was not gone. She was just buried. Buried under missed payments and bad luck, and one very specific Tuesday that changed everything. The Tuesday happened 2 years ago. Sarah was working at the dog food warehouse. She made $17 an hour. It was the most she had ever made. She had her own 1-bedroom apartment near City Park. She had a couch that folded out into a bed. She had a coffee maker that ran on a timer. She had a savings account with almost $3,000 in it. She was proud of that savings account. She looked at it once a week just to feel something solid under her feet. Then the warehouse had a fire. Electrical. Started in the break room at 2 a.m. Nobody got hurt, but the building was done. The company laid everyone off with 2 weeks of pay and a letter that said sorry for the inconvenience. Sarah filed for unemployment. The website crashed 3 times before she got through. The money came, it was not enough. She paid rent with it, she paid her phone bill, she bought groceries. The savings account started going down. $2,000, $1,500, $1,000. She applied for jobs every day. Nothing came back. She lowered her standards. She applied for anything. Still nothing. The savings account hit $400. She stopped looking at it. The eviction notice came on a Thursday. She was not home when they taped it to her door. She found it at 9:30 at night after walking home from a job interview that did not go well. The man who interviewed her asked why she had a 2-year gap on her resume. She said she had been working, but the company closed. He asked for a reference. She gave him the number of her old supervisor at the call center. The supervisor had moved and changed her number. Sarah did not know that until he called her back and said the number did not work. He did not call her again. She had 30 days to leave the apartment. She spent the first week in shock. She spent the second week packing. She spent the third week selling everything she owned. The couch went for $40 on Facebook Marketplace. The coffee maker went for $10. The dishes went to a thrift store for nothing. She kept her clothes. She kept her phone. She kept a small box of pictures. Her father at a barbecue. Her mother on her wedding day. Michelle at her high school graduation. She kept a necklace her grandmother gave her when she was 10. A small silver heart on a chain. She put the necklace on and had not taken it off since.
The last night in her apartment, she sat on the floor in the empty living room and cried. Not the kind of crying that stops after a while. The kind that comes from somewhere deeper than sadness. The kind that feels like the ground underneath you is gone and you are falling and there is nothing to grab onto. She cried until her head hurt and her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen shut. Then she stopped. She stood up. She picked up her backpack and her box of pictures, and she walked out the front door, and she did not look back. That was 2 years ago. 2 years of couches and shelters and her car before the car broke down. 2 years of Albuquerque and Phoenix, and finally Denver because she heard the economy was better. 2 years of watching her hands get rough and her confidence get soft. 2 years of telling herself tomorrow would be different and waking up to the same weight on her chest. The food bank line was down the block when she got there. 25 people at least. She knew some of them by sight. The man with the cane, the woman with the twins, the teenager who always wore a red hoodie and never made eye contact with anyone. They stood in silence. Nobody wanted to be there. Nobody wanted to admit this was their life. But they were there, and they were waiting, and that was something. That was not nothing. The church doors opened, and a volunteer waved them inside. Sarah walked through the basement and grabbed a plastic bag.
She filled it with rice and beans and canned vegetables and a loaf of bread that was 2 days old. A volunteer handed her a small carton of milk and a bag of apples. The apples were soft but not rotten. Sarah said thank you. The volunteer smiled. It was a real smile, not the kind people give you on the street when they are trying to look past you. A real one. Sarah almost cried. She did not. She took her bag and walked back outside. She found a bench near the park and ate one of the apples. It was mealy but sweet. She ate it slow. She had learned to eat slow. Fast eating meant you were still hungry when you finished. Slow eating tricked your stomach into thinking it had gotten more. She ate half the apple and wrapped the other half in a napkin and put it in her backpack. Future Sarah would need that apple. Present Sarah had to take care of future Sarah because nobody else was going to. Her phone buzzed. 1% battery. She looked at the screen. A text from Michelle. It said, "Call me, please." Just those 3 words. Sarah stared at them for a long time. She thought about calling. She thought about telling Michelle everything. About the bus station and the food bank and the way her back hurt from sleeping on concrete. About the shame that lived inside her chest like a second heart beating slower than the first. About the dream she still carried even though it was stupid to carry it. The dream was simple. She wanted to sign her name on something that mattered. A lease.
A contract. A piece of paper that said she belonged somewhere. She wanted to walk into a room and have people see her and not look away. She wanted to sit across from someone who believed in her enough to give her a chance. She wanted to be the person who signed the bottom line and knew that her signature meant something. She typed back to Michelle, "Not tonight. I will call you soon. Love you." She put the phone in her pocket and looked up at the sky. The clouds were moving fast, more cold coming. She pulled her hoodie up and started walking. The temp agency was 8 blocks away. She would check in. She would tell them she was available for anything. She would say yes to any job they offered, even the bad ones, especially the bad ones. She had no idea that in less than 2 hours, she would walk into that temp agency and meet a woman who would change everything. She had no idea that the application she was about to fill out would lead to an interview she almost did not go to. She had no idea that the signature at the bottom of a contract would feel the way she always imagined it would. She was just walking, just surviving, just putting one foot in front of the other the way she had done every day for 2 years. But something was different today. She could not name it. A feeling in her chest. Not hope exactly. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. It was something smaller, something quieter. A sense that the ground under her feet was not as loose as it used to be.
A sense that the falling might be almost over. She turned the corner onto Colfax and walked toward the temp agency. The door was propped open with a phone book. The temp agency smelled like coffee and copy paper and old carpet. Sarah walked in and saw 6 plastic chairs against the wall and a desk with a computer from 2005. A woman sat behind the desk. Her name tag said Wanda. She was maybe 55, with gold hoop earrings and red lipstick that had faded on the bottom lip. Wanda looked up and smiled. Not the fake smile, the real one again. 2 real smiles in one day. Sarah almost checked her reflection to make sure she was not bleeding. Wanda said, "Hey honey, you been here before?" Sarah said, "Yes, about 3 weeks ago." Wanda nodded and pulled a clipboard from under the desk. She said, "Fill this out again. Our system wiped last month and we lost everybody." Sarah took the clipboard and sat in the plastic chair closest to the door. The pen was almost out of ink. She pressed hard and wrote her name, Sarah Marie Cortez. She wrote her phone number. She wrote her address. She paused at the address. She did not have one. She wrote the address of the library on Broadway. It was not a lie exactly. She got her mail there. She wrote down her work history, the dog food warehouse, the call center, the restaurant jobs from years ago. She wrote down that she could lift 50 pounds and stand for 8 hours and work any shift. She wrote down that she had reliable transportation.
That was a lie. She had a bus pass with 1 ride left. But you do not get a job by telling the truth about the bus. You get a job and then you figure out the bus. She handed the clipboard back to Wanda. Wanda looked it over and said, "Hang on." She typed something into the old computer. The computer made sounds Sarah had not heard since high school, whirring and clicking like it was thinking really hard about something. Wanda squinted at the screen and then looked at Sarah. She said, "I got something. It is not glamorous, but it pays." Sarah said, "I do not need glamorous." Wanda said, "Office cleaning, downtown, $16.50 an hour, 4 nights a week, 10 to 2 in the morning. Starts tomorrow if you want it." Sarah wanted it. She wanted it so bad she almost said yes before Wanda finished talking, but she held still. She said, "Yes, thank you. When can I start?" Wanda said, "Tomorrow at 10. Be at this address." She wrote an address on a yellow sticky note, 1700 Broadway, 17th floor. Ask for Marcus. Sarah took the sticky note like it was made of gold. She folded it twice and put it in her pocket next to the half apple. She walked out of the temp agency and the sun had come out. Not warm, just bright. The kind of Denver winter sun that fools you into thinking it might be warm until the wind hits. She did not care about the wind. She had a job, a real job, $16.50 an hour, 28 hours a week. That was $462 before taxes. That was rent on a room somewhere. That was food that was not from a food bank. That was a shower every day if she found the right place. That was a future Sarah could almost touch. She walked to the library and sat at the same computer. She opened a new tab and typed in "Rooms for Rent Denver under 500. The results were not good. A basement in Aurora with no windows. A shared room in a house with 6 other people. A place near the highway that said no cooking, no guests, no parking, no lease. She wrote down 3 numbers anyway. She would call them tomorrow after she had the job. Do not count the money before you earn it. She learned that from her father. He said it all the time. He never followed his own advice, but he was right about that one thing. She spent the rest of the afternoon at the library. She charged her phone to 40%. She read a magazine about gardening. She did not garden, she had never gardened, but the pictures were nice and the words were quiet, and it felt good to look at something that was not a job application or a list of shelters. She read an article about growing tomatoes in a 5-gallon bucket. She thought about that. A bucket of dirt on a balcony somewhere.
a plant that grew because she watered it, a thing that lived because she took care of it. She wanted that more than she wanted almost anything. The sun went down and the library closed, and Sarah walked back to the bus station. She slipped through the fence and went to her corner behind the ticket counter. She unrolled her sleeping bag and sat down with her back against the wall. She pulled out the half apple and ate it. Then she pulled out the sticky note with the address. 1700 Broadway, 17th floor. Ask for Marcus. She read it 3 times. She folded it again and put it back in her pocket. She lay down and looked up at the missing ceiling tiles. She could see the dark sky through the holes. A few stars. Not many. Denver lights drowned most of them out. But a few were still there. Tiny and far away and still burning. She thought about her grandmother who gave her the silver heart necklace. Her grandmother was from a small town in southern Colorado. She grew up poor. She married young. She worked in a school cafeteria for 30 years. She saved money in a coffee can. She never had a credit card. She never owed anybody anything. She died in her sleep at 78, with the coffee can still half full of cash. Sarah touched the necklace under her shirt. She thought about what her grandmother would say if she could see her now, sleeping in an abandoned bus station, eating half apples, wearing the same jeans for a week. Her grandmother would not be ashamed of her. That was not the kind of woman she was. She would be sad, but she would not be surprised. She knew how hard the world could be. She knew that good people ended up in bad places all the time.
She also knew that the only way out was through, one step at a time, one day at a time, one application at a time, one shift at a time. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind was loud again. Not the scared loud, not the hopeless loud, a new kind of loud, a loud full of questions. What if she messed up the job? What if Marcus did not like her? What if she could not stay awake until 2 a.m? What if her body gave out? What if her mind gave out? What if this was just another almost thing that did not quite work? She pushed the questions away. She could not afford them. Questions were a luxury for people with savings accounts. She needed to sleep. She needed to show up tomorrow at 10 o'clock and do a good job and get paid and keep going. That was the whole plan. That was the only plan. Get the money, get a room, get another job, get another room, build something so small and so slow that nobody would even notice until one day she looked around and realized she was not falling anymore. She fell asleep somewhere after midnight. The train woke her up at 5. The same train horn, the same gray light, the same cold, but something was different. She had somewhere to go, not just a list of things to do, a real place with a real address and a real person named Marcus who was expecting her. She packed her sleeping bag and slipped through the fence and walked toward Broadway. She had 7 hours before her shift started. She spent them at the library. She washed her face in the bathroom. She brushed her teeth with her finger and the last of her toothpaste. She put on a clean shirt from her backpack. It was wrinkled, but it did not smell. She combed her hair with her fingers. She looked at herself in the mirror. Still tired, still thin, still older than 31. But something in her eyes was different. A little light, a little life, a little bit of the person she used to know. She left the library at 8 and walked toward downtown. She wanted to be early. Early was respectful. Early showed you cared. Early meant Marcus would remember her name for a good reason. She got to 1700 Broadway at 9:15. The building was tall and glass and modern. She had never been inside a building like this. She stood across the street and looked at it. People in nice clothes walked in and out. They had briefcases and coffee cups and lanyards around their necks. They looked like they belonged there. She did not, but she would pretend. Pretending was free. She crossed the street and walked through the revolving door. The library was warm and bright and smelled like flowers. A security guard sat behind a big desk. He was a large man with a shaved head and a kind face. He said, "Can I help you, miss?" Sarah said, "Yes, I am here for Marcus. Office cleaning, 17th floor." The guard looked at a list on his computer. He said, "Your name?" Sarah said, "Sarah Cortez." He nodded and pointed to the elevators. He said, "Take the first one on the left." "Marcus will meet you upstairs." The elevator was fast and quiet. Sarah watched the numbers go up. Lobby, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16,
17. The doors opened and she stepped into a hallway with gray carpet and white walls. A man was standing by the elevator. He was maybe 40, short, stocky, carrying a ring of keys that jingled when he moved. He said, "You, Sarah?" She said, "Yes." He said, "I am Marcus. Follow me." She followed him down the hallway. He walked fast. She had to almost jog to keep up. He talked without looking back. He said, "This floor has 12 offices. You will clean all of them. Vacuum, take out trash, wipe down desks, clean the kitchen and the bathrooms. Do not touch anything on the desks. Do not move papers. Do not unplug anything. If something is broken, write it down and tell me. Do not try to fix it yourself." He stopped in front of a supply closet and opened the door. Inside was a vacuum cleaner and bottles of cleaner and rolls of trash bags and paper towels. He said, "This is your stuff. Put it back when you are done. Lock the closet every time. I will check your work at the end of the night. If it is good, you keep the job. If it is not, you do not. Any questions?" Sarah said, "No, sir." He looked at her for the first time, really looked, not at her clothes or her face or her hands, at her eyes. He said, "You ever done cleaning before?" She said yes, she had. The dog food warehouse. She cleaned her station every night. She cleaned the break room when nobody else would. She said, "I know how to work." He nodded and handed her the keys. He said, "Start in the corner office, the one with the view." She pushed the supply cart to the corner office and opened the door. The room was huge, floor-to-ceiling windows looking west at the mountains. A desk the size of her old apartment. A leather chair that probably cost more than her car used to cost. She stood there for a minute just looking at the mountains. The sun was setting behind them, orange and pink and purple, the kind of sky you see in postcards. She had lived in Denver for almost a year and she had never seen the mountains from this high up. She felt something in her chest. Not hope. Not yet. Something smaller. Something like maybe. She took out the trash first. Then she wiped the desk. Slow. Careful. She cleaned the smudges off the glass table. She vacuumed the rug. She cleaned the bathroom down the hall. She scrubbed the sink and the toilet and the mirror. She looked at herself in that mirror and saw the same tired face, but she smiled anyway. Just a little. Just for herself. At midnight, Marcus came by with a clipboard. He walked through each office. He ran his finger along the tops of the desks. He checked the trash cans. He looked in the bathroom. Then he came back to where Sarah was putting the supplies away. He wrote something on his clipboard and looked at her. He said, "You are thorough." She said, "Thank you."
He said, "Come back tomorrow night, same time." She said, "I will be here." She walked out of the building at 2:15 in the morning. The streets were empty. The air was cold but not bitter. She had $43 in her shoe and a job that paid in 2 weeks and a corner in an abandoned bus station. That was not much, but it was more than she had yesterday. It was a start. It was a real, honest start. She walked back to Colfax and slipped through the fence and lay down in her sleeping bag. She could still smell the lemon cleaner on her hands. She could still see the mountains from that big window. She could still feel the weight of the keys Marcus had handed her. Keys to a supply closet. Keys to nothing, really, but they felt like something. They felt like a door that was not quite closed. She closed her eyes and slept deeper than she had slept in months. The next 2 weeks were hard in a way she did not expect. Not physically hard. She could do the work. The work was easy. The hard part was waiting. Waiting for the first paycheck. Waiting to see if Marcus would keep her. Waiting for something to go wrong because something always went wrong. That was the voice in her head. The voice that sounded like every boss who ever let her go, and every landlord who ever evicted her, and every door that ever closed. The voice said, "Do not get comfortable. Do not believe this will last. Do not let yourself want it too much, because wanting makes the losing worse." She tried to ignore the voice. Some days she could. Some days she could not. On the 10th day, Marcus handed her an envelope. She opened it in the elevator on the way down. A paycheck for $437.82. She stared at it. She had not held a paycheck in almost 2 years. The last one was from the dog food warehouse. She folded the check carefully and put it in her bra, safest place she had. She walked to a bank on Colfax that she knew would cash it for a small fee. The teller asked for her ID. Sarah handed it over. The teller counted out $437.82 in 20s and 10s and 5s and 1s. Sarah put the money in her shoe. All of it. She would find a room tomorrow.
Tonight she would sleep in the bus station one more time. She found a room the next day. A woman named Diane posted an ad on the bulletin board at the library. Room for rent in a house near City Park. $400 a month. Shared bathroom. No lease. Month to month. Sarah called the number and Diane answered on the first ring. She sounded old and tired, but not mean. She said, "Come see it at 4." The house was a yellow bungalow with a porch that sagged in the middle. Diane was 72 years old. She had lived in the house for 40 years. Her husband died 10 years ago. Her kids lived in other states. She rented out 2 rooms to make ends meet. The other renter was a man named Terrence who worked at a car wash and kept to himself.
The room was small, a twin bed, a dresser, a window that faced the street. It was clean. It was warm. It was not a bus station. Sarah paid Diane $400 in cash. Diane gave her a key, a real key to a real door. Sarah held it in her hand and felt something crack open inside her chest. Not pain, something else, something that had been frozen for a long time, starting to thaw. She put her backpack on the bed. She hung her jacket on the back of the door. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. 4 walls, a ceiling, a floor that did not have broken tiles. She lay down and put her head on the pillow and cried. Not the bad crying from the empty apartment, a different kind. The kind that comes when you have been holding your breath for 2 years and finally someone tells you it is okay to breathe. She worked the cleaning job for 6 weeks. Marcus started giving her more responsibility. He asked her to train the new people. He asked her to check the supplies and order what was low. He asked her to close up the floor at the end of the night. She did everything he asked, and she did it well. She started showing up early and staying late. She cleaned the break room even when it was not her turn. She organized the supply closet so everything had a place. She fixed the vacuum cleaner when it broke. She found the manual online at the library and watched a video on how to replace the belt. She fixed it with a paper clip and a pair of pliers from the maintenance closet. Marcus noticed. He pulled her aside one night and said, "You are better than this job." Sarah did not know what to say. She said, "Thank you." He said, "I mean it. You are smart. You work hard. You solve problems. You should be doing something more than cleaning toilets at 2 in the morning." She said, "I am doing what I can." He nodded and said, "I know, but keep your eyes open. Opportunities come when you least expect them." She thought about what he said for days. She was 31 years old. She had no degree. She had no savings. She had a room in an old woman's house and a job that paid $16.50 an hour. That was not nothing. That was a lot. But Marcus was right. She could do more. She wanted to do more. The question was how. She started going to the library every afternoon before work. She stopped reading gardening magazines. She started reading about business, about management, about how to run an office. She watched videos on the library computers about project management and customer service and leadership. She took notes in a spiral notebook she found in a trash can at work. The notebook was half full of someone else's grocery lists. She tore those pages out and started fresh. One night she was cleaning the corner office with the mountain view. She finished her work early and sat in the leather chair for a minute. She looked out the window at the lights of the city. She thought about the bus station. She thought about the food bank. She thought about the half apple she ate on that bench. She thought about the woman in the mirror who looked older than 31. She said out loud to no one, "I am not done yet." The next week, Marcus came to her with news. The company that owned the building was looking for a receptionist, daytime hours, Monday through Friday, $20 an hour, full-time with benefits. He said, "You should apply." She said, "I do not have experience." He said, "You have 2 years of call center work. You have 6 weeks of showing up on time. You have a work ethic that most people with degrees do not have. That is experience." She applied that night at the library. She typed a cover letter that said, "My name is Sarah Cortez, and I have been cleaning this building for 6 weeks. I know every floor and every office and every person who works late. I answer the phone like I am talking to someone I care about. I solve problems before they become emergencies. I would like the chance to prove that I belong at that front desk." She hit send and leaned back in the library chair. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michelle. It said, "I miss you." Sarah typed back, "I miss you too. I will call you this weekend, I promise." This time she meant it. The phone rang 3 times before Michelle picked up. Sarah almost hung up on the second ring. Her heart was beating fast and her mouth was dry, and she did not know what to say.
Then Michelle's voice came through the line. "Hello?" Just that one word. Sarah started crying before she could say anything back. Not loud crying, the kind where your throat closes and your eyes burn and you cannot make a sound come out. Michelle said, "Sarah, is that you?" Sarah said, "Yeah, it is me." Michelle said, "Where are you?" Sarah said, "I am in Denver." Michelle said, "Denver? Why are you in Denver?" Sarah said, "I have been here for almost a year." There was a long pause. Sarah could hear Michelle breathing. She could hear a kid crying in the background. Michelle said, "I have been calling you for months." Sarah said, "I know." Michelle said, "I thought you were dead." Sarah said, "I know." Michelle said, "Do not do that to me again." Sarah said, "I will not." They talked for an hour. Sarah told Michelle most of it, not all of it. She left out the bus station. She left out the half apple. She left out the nights when she thought about walking into traffic just to feel something different. She told her about the cleaning job. She told her about the room in the yellow house. She told her about the receptionist application. Michelle listened and did not interrupt. When Sarah was done, Michelle said, "I am coming to see you." Sarah said, "You do not have to." Michelle said, "I am coming anyway." She came 2 weeks later. She drove from Aurora with her boyfriend and the 2 kids. They pulled up to the yellow house on a Saturday morning. Sarah was sitting on the porch drinking coffee.
She stood up when she saw Michelle's car. Her sister looked different, older, tired, but the same smile, the same crooked tooth on the left side, the same laugh that came out too loud for no reason. They hugged on the porch for a long time. Michelle squeezed so hard Sarah could not breathe. She did not care. She squeezed back. The kids ran around the yard. The boyfriend stood by the car and waved. Sarah waved back. Michelle pulled away and looked at her sister's face. She said, "You look thin." Sarah said, "I am fine." Michelle said, "You look tired." Sarah said, "I am fine." Michelle said, "You are not fine, but you are alive, and that is enough for today." They spent the day together. Michelle bought lunch from a taco truck on Colfax. They ate on a bench in the park. The kids played on the swings. Michelle asked questions, soft questions, not the kind that hurt. She asked what Sarah wanted to do next. Sarah said she wanted the receptionist job. She said she wanted to stay in Denver. She said she wanted to save enough money to get her own place someday, a real apartment, with her name on the lease. Michelle said, "You can do that." Sarah said, "I do not know." Michelle said, "I know. You have always been the strong one." Sarah laughed. She said, "I am not strong." Michelle said, "You are the strongest person I know. You just forgot for a while." That night after Michelle left, Sarah sat in her room and looked at the silver heart necklace in her hand. She turned it over and over.
She thought about her grandmother. She thought about the coffee can full of cash. She thought about the 5-gallon bucket of tomatoes. She thought about a balcony somewhere. She thought about a door with her name on it. Not a supply closet, a front door. A door she opened with her own key. The call came on a Wednesday. Sarah was at the library. Her phone rang and the number was from the building management company. She answered on the first ring. A woman named Patricia said, "Hello, is this Sarah Cortez?" Sarah said yes. Patricia said, "I reviewed your application for the receptionist position." Sarah held her breath. Patricia said, "I would like to bring you in for an interview. Can you come to the office on Friday at 10 in the morning?" Sarah said yes. Patricia said, 17th floor. Ask for me." Sarah said thank you. Patricia said, "See you Friday." She hung up and stared at the computer screen. Her hands were shaking. She had not been to an interview in 2 years. The last one was the man who asked about the gap on her resume and then never called back. She did not have nice clothes. She did not have a way to do her hair. She did not have the words to explain the last 2 years of her life. But she had something else. She had 6 weeks of showing up. She had a key to a supply closet that she treated like it was made of gold. She had Marcus, who believed in her. She had a sister who drove across the state because she thought Sarah might be dead. She went to Goodwill that afternoon.
She found a black blazer for $6. It was too big in the shoulders, but it looked professional. She found a white blouse for $3. It had a small stain on the collar, but the blazer covered it. She found a pair of black pants for $4. They fit perfectly. She spent $13 total. She had 27 left. She went back to the yellow house and tried everything on. She looked at herself in the mirror on the back of the bedroom door. The woman looking back at her was still thin, still tired, still older than 31, but she was standing up straight, she was wearing a blazer, she was trying. That was something. That was not nothing. The night before the interview, she barely slept. She lay in bed and ran through questions in her head. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Why do you want this job? She practiced her answers out loud in the dark. Her voice sounded small. She made it louder. She sounded like someone who belonged behind a desk. She almost believed it. She woke up at 6. She showered at Diane's house. The water was warm. She stayed under it for a long time. She washed her hair twice. She shaved her legs with a disposable razor she found under the sink. She put on the Goodwill clothes. She looked at herself one more time. She touched the silver heart under her blouse. She said out loud, "You can do this." She got to 1700 Broadway at 9:30. The same building, the same revolving door.
The same security guard with the shaved head. He smiled and said, "Good morning, Miss Cortez." She said, "Good morning." He said, "Patricia is waiting for you, 17th floor." She walked to the elevator and pressed the button. The doors opened and she stepped inside. She watched the numbers go up. Lobby, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17. The doors opened and she stepped into the same gray carpet and the same white walls. But this time, she was not pushing a supply cart. This time, she was wearing a blazer. This time, she was going to an interview. Patricia met her at the elevator. She was maybe 45 with short gray hair and glasses on a chain. She shook Sarah's hand and said, "Nice to meet you." Sarah said, "Nice to meet you too." The interview was in a small conference room with a glass table and a view of the mountains. Patricia asked all the questions Sarah had practiced. She answered them. Not perfectly. She stumbled over a few words. She said, too many times. But she was honest. She said, "I have been cleaning this building for 6 weeks. I know how it runs. I know who works late and who needs coffee in the morning and who forgets their key card. I can do this job." Patricia nodded and wrote something on a notepad. She said, "Tell me about the gap in your resume." Sarah took a breath. This was the moment she had been afraid of. She said, "I lost my job 2 years ago. Then I lost my apartment. Then I lost almost everything." She paused. Patricia did not say anything. Sarah said, "I have been working my way back. It has been slow, but I am here. I am clean. I am sober. I am ready." She did not say she was homeless. She did not say she slept in a bus station. She told the truth without telling all of it. Patricia put her pen down. She looked at Sarah for a long time. Then she said, "I am going to be honest with you. There are people with degrees who applied for this job. There are people with 10 years of experience who applied for this job." Sarah nodded. She felt her chest get tight. Patricia said, "But none of them cleaned this building. None of them know the tenants by name. None of them fixed a vacuum cleaner with a paperclip." Sarah did not know what to say. Patricia said, "The job is yours if you want it." Sarah opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She closed it. She opened it again. She said yes. Patricia smiled. She said, "You start Monday, 9 to 5. We will do your paperwork then." Sarah stood up and shook Patricia's hand. Her hand was shaking. Patricia squeezed it and said, "You earned this." Sarah walked out of the building and stood on the sidewalk. The sun was bright. The wind was cold. People walked past her with their coffee cups and their briefcases. She did not care about any of them. She pulled out her phone and called Michelle. Michelle answered on the first ring. Sarah said, "I got the job." Michelle started crying. Sarah started crying.
They cried on the phone together for a full minute before either of them said anything else. Michelle said, "I am so proud of you." Sarah said, "I am proud of me too." She started the job on Monday. The reception desk was on the 17th floor. She had a computer and a phone and a nameplate that said Sarah. She answered calls and greeted visitors and sorted mail. She learned everyone's name. She remembered their coffee orders. She knew which executives liked to be called Mr. and which ones wanted first names. She was good at it. The same patience she learned at the call center. The same attention to detail she learned cleaning offices at 2 a.m. The same stubborn hope she carried through every night in the bus station. The first paycheck came 2 weeks later. It was for $1,200. Sarah looked at the number and did not know what to feel. She had not seen that much money in her name since the dog food warehouse. She cashed the check and paid Diane her rent. She put $500 in a savings account, a new savings account at a credit union near the yellow house. She kept the card in her wallet. She looked at it sometimes just to feel something solid under her feet. She worked the receptionist job for 6 months. Then Patricia asked her if she wanted to learn the administrative side of the business. Sarah said yes. She started helping with scheduling and payroll and client communications. She took a night class at the community college.
Business communications. The class met twice a week. She was the oldest person in the room. She did not care. She took notes. She asked questions. She got an A. After a year, she got promoted. Office coordinator. $25 an hour. A desk in the back with a window that faced the mountains. Not the corner office, but close. She could see the same sky, the same orange and pink and purple. She watched the sunset from that window almost every night. She never got tired of it. She moved out of Diane's house after 18 months. She found a studio apartment near City Park, 500 square feet, a kitchen with 2 working burners, a bathroom with a shower that did not drip, a balcony, a small one, just big enough for a chair and a 5-gallon bucket. She bought a tomato plant from a nursery on Colfax. She put it in the bucket. She watered it every morning. It grew. It grew tomatoes, small ones, red and sweet. She ate them on the balcony and watched the sun go down. She bought a couch, not from IKEA, a real couch from a furniture store. She paid for it with her debit card. She bought dishes and cups and a coffee maker that ran on a timer. She bought a picture of her father at a barbecue. She put it on the wall. She bought a picture of her mother on her wedding day. She put it next to him. She bought a picture of Michelle at her high school graduation. She put it in the middle. She called her mother in Phoenix. The call was short and strange. Her mother sounded old.
The man she lived with was in the background watching television. Her mother asked if Sarah needed money. Sarah said no. Her mother said, "Are you sure?" Sarah said, "I am sure." Her mother said, "Okay," and then there was nothing else to say. Sarah said, "I love you." Her mother said, "Love you too." It was not the conversation Sarah wanted, but it was a conversation. That was more than they had in years. She flew to Aurora for Thanksgiving. Michelle picked her up from the airport. They hugged at the baggage claim. Michelle said, "You look good." Sarah said, "I feel good." Michelle said, "You have color in your face." Sarah said, "I have a balcony." Michelle laughed. They drove to the duplex and ate turkey on paper plates. The kids were loud and messy and wonderful. Sarah helped with the dishes. She helped put the kids to bed. She sat on the couch with Michelle after everyone was asleep, and they talked until 2 a.m. Michelle said, "Do you ever think about those years?" Sarah said, "All the time." Michelle said, "Do you ever think about how you made it?" Sarah said, "Every day." Michelle said, "What do you think it was?" Sarah thought about it for a minute. She said, "I think it was not wanting to die on the street." She said, "I think it was Deborah at the church with the sleeping bag." She said, "I think it was Wanda at the temp agency." She said, "I think it was Marcus who saw something in me when I could not see it myself." She said, "I think it was you who kept calling even when I would not answer."
Michelle reached over and took her hand. She said, "I was so scared for you." Sarah said, "I know." Michelle said, "I thought you were going to die." Sarah said, "I know." Michelle said, "Do not ever do that to me again." Sarah said, "I will not." She went back to Denver the next day. She sat on her balcony and looked at the city. The lights were coming on. The mountains were dark against the sky. She thought about the bus station on Colfax. She wondered if anyone was sleeping there tonight. She wondered if they had a sleeping bag and a beanie and a phone with a cracked screen. She wondered if they had a sister who kept calling. She wondered if they had a Deborah or a Wanda or a Marcus. She thought about going back to the bus station, just to see it, just to remember. She did not go. She was not ready. Maybe someday, but not yet. The next morning, she walked into the office on 1700 Broadway. She said good morning to the security guard. She took the elevator to the 17th floor. She sat at her desk and opened her computer. She had emails to answer and schedules to make and people to help. It was a normal day, a boring day, a beautiful day. At lunch, she walked to the library on Broadway. She sat at the same computer in the back corner, the one with the good lighting and the outlets that worked. She opened the job search website. She was not looking for a job. She was looking for something else. She typed in the search bar, "How to help people who are homeless in Denver." She read article after article. She wrote down names and numbers and addresses. She found a shelter that needed volunteers to serve dinner. She found a food bank that needed help sorting donations. She found a program that helped people get their GED. She called the shelter that afternoon. A woman answered. Sarah said, "I want to volunteer." The woman said, "When can you start?" Sarah said, "Tomorrow." The woman said, "Come at 5." Sarah said, "I will be there." She showed up at 5. The shelter was on Colfax, not far from the bus station. She walked through the doors and smelled the same smell, bleach and bodies and old food. She stood in the serving line and put food on plates. She smiled at the people who came through. She did not say, "I used to be you." She did not need to. They could see it in her eyes. The ones who were still in it could always see it. She did not hide it. She let them see. A woman came through the line. She was maybe 25, thin, tired, wearing a Broncos beanie, black with orange letters. Sarah looked at her and felt something crack open in her chest again. The woman said, "Thank you." Sarah said, "You are welcome." The woman moved on. Sarah watched her go. She said a quiet prayer to a God she was not sure she believed in. She prayed that woman had a sister who kept calling. She worked at the shelter every Tuesday night for a year. Then she started volunteering at the food bank on Saturdays. Then she started mentoring a young woman named Jasmine who had been homeless for 8 months. Jasmine was 22. She had a 2-year-old daughter who lived with Jasmine's mother. Jasmine was clean and sober and terrified. Sarah sat with her in the library. She helped her fill out applications. She taught her how to interview. She told her about the temp agency on Colfax. She told her about Wanda. Jasmine got a job at a diner. Then she got a room in a house near the university. Then she got her daughter back. Jasmine called Sarah on a Tuesday night. She was crying. She said, "I did it." Sarah said, "You did it." Jasmine said, "Thank you." Sarah said, "Do not thank me. You did the work." Jasmine said, "I had help." Sarah said, "That is what people are for." Sarah sat on her balcony after the call. The tomato plant had died. It was winter again. She would plant a new one in the spring. She looked at her hands, the hands that had scrubbed toilets and wiped desks and signed her name on a lease, the hands that had held a half apple and a sticky note and a key to a supply closet, the hands that had learned to work and keep working and work some more. She thought about the contract she had signed 6 months ago, the lease on the studio apartment, her name on the line, Sarah Marie Cortez. She signed it with a pen that was not almost out of ink. She signed it at a kitchen table that was hers. She signed it in a building with a front door that locked from the inside. She thought about how that signature felt, solid, real, like putting a period at the end of a long sentence, like closing a door and opening a window at the same time. The bus station is still there on Colfax. The chain link fence is still cut in that one spot. The ceiling tiles are still missing. The Greyhound schedule from 2019 is still stuck under the broken chair. Sarah drove past it last week. She did not stop. She did not need to. That place is not her home anymore. It is just a place she slept. Just a corner behind a ticket counter where she learned that falling does not mean you stay down. She pulled into the parking lot of her apartment building. She sat in her car for a minute. Her car, a 2015 Honda she bought with cash from her savings account. She looked at the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her was 34 years old. Her skin was better, her eyes were brighter, her hair was clean. She did not look like the woman in the library mirror. She looked like someone who had been through something and come out the other side. Not unscathed, but standing. Still standing. She got out of the car and walked up the stairs to her apartment. She unlocked the door. She hung her keys on a hook by the door, a hook she installed herself. She walked to the balcony and looked at the city. The lights were coming on. The mountains were dark against the sky. She touched the silver heart around her neck. The moral at the end of a story like this is not complicated.
It is just true. You do not get to choose what breaks you. You do not get to choose when the floor gives out, or who stays, or who leaves, or how long the night is going to last. But you do get to choose what you carry. You get to choose whether you put one foot in front of the other, even when there is no reason to believe it will ever get better. You get to choose whether you answer the phone when your sister calls. You get to choose whether you tell the truth in an interview or hide behind a lie. You get to choose whether you fix the vacuum cleaner with a paperclip or just leave it broken. Small choices, 1,000 of them, stacked on top of each other like bricks. One morning you look up and you are not in the bus station anymore. You are somewhere else, somewhere you built, somewhere that belongs to you.
Not because you were lucky, because you kept going when being lucky was not an option. So here's the question. What are you carrying right now that you were never meant to carry? And what would happen if you put it down?